Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here. I got my coffee and I'm ready to get cozy and go over the lovely game experiences I had this year. Gaming just gives me such joy, so this is just a happy time for me to review everything that I played this year. It's going to be a fairly lengthy video, so I'm just going to jump right into it in a second, but I wanted to lay out a bit of the structure. There are only a couple of things to keep in mind here. The most principal of which is it's my list, my rules. So the only reason I do this is because it's fun and I just love being able to make tier lists. I love to be able to rank things. And you know, back in the day, there was this game publication that had this review system where they had, you know, graphics, sound, gameplay, but they also had something called a tilt value. And the tilt value is essentially just how does this game connect to you, or how much are you just feeling, a gut reaction to how you're feeling to it. And that's what this whole list is about. It's about gut feeling. It's about the tilt value. So while I very often like to spend an inordinate amount of time just to dig into the minutia and the details of all the games and look at it from a critical level, more often than not, this list is just going to compose how I feel about the game after a full year. Number two is this list is just purposefully dumb. I mean, it incorporates games from many different years and that I just happened to play this year. It has games that are like, you know, from like a $30 budget up to a $300 million budget. And so that's just going to be part of the challenge and fun of this list, is just having everything ranked together, even though it never makes any sense. So without further ado, I say let's just get right into it. And to start us off, we're going to have a category of games that are unranked for various reasons. But for the most part, it's just games that I'm replaying again, and I just don't feel like they fit into the main list of games. Again, my rules. So I just felt like I choose which games probably don't make a lot of sense to be in the main list, and here they are. Remake, remaster, whatever you want to call it, it's a brilliant return to one of the best games ever made. In particular, I'd say nothing else this year matched at the very least the sound design of The Last of Us Part 1. It was a complete feast for the senses. If I put this game into the main list the main running, I think it would be at the top or near the top. It just didn't make sense given it's a very faithful remake. You ever play a game that knocks you on your ass so hard that it feels like a piece of you never got back up? I replayed this game for the third time this year. This has slowly been building into my favorite game of all time, maybe? Which is wild to think about. As the months and years go on, it keeps haunting me and occupying some of my thoughts. The world and characters in this game feel so concrete in a way that a lot of other media is not. The world in The Last of Us is extremely hostile, but it has been an amazing place to tell these stories about people who are just trying to find their way through life. And I think it would take a full essay to break down all the ways that this game succeeds. I can't wait to play the multiplayer Last of Us game next year and to check out the brand new HBO show. This is another remaster of a PlayStation 4 favorite. It caps off the blockbuster Nathan Drake saga. The visuals are amazing, the popcorn adventure style is here in full force, and the DualSense controller feedback feels great. I've always loved the conclusion in this game, which goes for a more grounded approach without spoiling anything. This is a great version of an excellent adventure game. I played this game for the second time this year, and the quality of the environments and various action sequences are what keep me coming back to this game. In particular, I really loved how they made the gameplay more engaging and visceral from the previous title, Resident Evil 7. It's with a design that's closer to something like Resident Evil 4. Returning to this game, especially enjoyed the first half of the game where it feels like you're on this big spooky carnival ride. It really holds up, and it was a joy to return to. I absolutely love cities, and Grand Theft Auto 5 is the best city simulator ever made. Even after almost 10 years, nothing else really comes close to feeling like you're walking around in a living, breathing metropolis. In replaying the game, it can become even more apparent that GTA 5 holds up a mirror rather than tries to give any unique commentary of its own. But you know, mirrors can be interesting. They can show you the things that are alarming and beautiful. The secret best single-player RPG is back, and this series was capped off in something called Endwalker. It's a sprawling tale that's as big as any other standalone RPG. It has a beautiful story, a memorable soundtrack, and it slowly built up tension that crescendos in an emotional finale. What a wonderful conclusion to this massive 5-game arc. What a comeback it has been for this team. I don't really care about MMOs, but they won me over with this one, with the world, story, and music, and I can't wait to see what comes next. Now we get into a brand new category. This is a category of games that I tried to play. So either I tried a sampling of it, or I tried to get into it and couldn't get into it for some reason or another. But let's jump into those and see what I thought. Intelligent Cube is a PlayStation 1 action-y puzzle game about trying to stop rolling cubes from knocking you off a platform. In order to do so, you mark spots on the ground where the cube will roll to. It takes quick thinking. I just found the game to be fairly uninteresting, and worse still, it just didn't age very well on the control side. The puzzle elements did feel a bit squishy to me, like they weren't too elegant, and it didn't really feel that it provided a thread that I wanted to keep pulling on. Somewhat disappointed it aged this badly. Ape Escape, another under the category of aged poorly, though not nearly as much maybe as Intelligent Cube. If I take off my glasses and squint really hard, this game looks amazing and is charming design to boot. Unfortunately though, you probably just had to be there. I love the idea of going around and catching monkeys who have these rotating lights on their head and catching them with a net, but the controls, camera, general clunkiness of the title really hold it back today. Still, love the overall design of the characters in this franchise. Ollie Ollie World. I went through a limited trial of the full game. On paper, I should love this game. The visual design is charming, the music is great, and there's this cool skateboarding element to it. Something about the speed of the game on the horizontal movement just didn't seem fun to me, or it just didn't work for me. It was like too busy. It felt tiring to watch for the obstacles streaming in, and as much as I love the side levels in Donkey Kong Country that are on minecarts or whatever, I'm not sure I was ready for a full game in that vein. It's sad it just didn't click with me more. Fire Emblem Three Hopes. It's a warrior/Musou style game, so it has these huge armies that you plow through and attacks that send 50 people flying with a single swipe. It's also in the Fire Emblem universe and based on one of my favorite entries, which is called Fire Emblem Three Houses. In theory, this sounds awesome, but in practice, I just find it makes combat feel kind of weightless and inconsequential. I just wasn't feeling this at all. Unfortunately, it just felt like a clunky and shallow version of a more cerebral, higher quality game in Three Houses. Glad I got to play a demo though, so as I don't think I would have enjoyed the full game. Siphon Filter. I only played one level of this game before turning it off. This is a textbook definition of had to be there, or as maybe even a product of its time. Time being 1999. And honestly, I don't even know if this would have played okay even back then. It just feels incredibly clunky. I couldn't make my way through even a single level before calling it quits. And this is coming from someone who actually likes playing and likes the controls in something like GoldenEye and 64. Gravity Rush. Similarly, I only played a couple of levels of this game before moving on. I love the idea of playing with gravity, as well as the comic book-like interstitials. Those elements are so cool. The main character also seemed pretty fun as well, with a great design. I just wish the game didn't feel so creaky in 2022. I had to just move on. Ashen. This sounds like a cop-out, but it feels almost unfair to play Ashen after running the gamut of all From Software titles that are Souls-like titles. It's so obvious playing off those ideas, but unfortunately it just can't match the quality levels. At every turn I was thinking of how I almost burnt out of Souls games as it is, and why would I just put myself through playing a lesser version or interpretation of one of those games when I could be playing the real deal in something like Dark Souls 3 or a replay of Bloodborne or something like that. Deliver Us the Moon. This is a narrative-based puzzle game. The Earth is being starved of resources, and international organizations decide to venture to the moon to gather essential energy. A previous mission had gone wrong, and the crew had disappeared or just became incommunicado, and it's up to you to find out what happened and find the solution to mankind's resource problem. So for this one, I just didn't find the puzzles or narrative flowing very well, so I didn't feel very compelled to keep playing. I might give it a second shot later though, maybe if I'm in a different headspace. I like a good mystery, and especially one that's in space. League of Legends. I went through the game tutorials and played a couple of matches, but I started to doubt if this entire genre is for me at all. It seems very grindy and honestly quite complicated. Like the matrix of character moves and matchups is just overwhelming. And so if you want to understand the game, it almost feels like you need to know 100 plus characters versus 100 plus different characters. Still, maybe I just need to give it more time and go through with somebody who understands it better, and they could show me the ropes. Yeah, so I might give it another try someday. Runner 2. Much like Ollie Ollie World, Runner 2 just had your character traveling horizontally on screen with things just coming quickly off screen and you have to avoid them. The difference here is that most of Runner 2 has you adding music notes as you're jumping and sliding along. I actually really enjoyed the music elements and found the game to be just the right amount of challenging, but it didn't hold my attention too long. Perhaps it was a bit too shallow for me. I had a similar issue with Ollie Ollie World in that I find the elements coming off screen very quickly to just not be very fun for me. And that's maybe just a me problem, but it's just a personal thing. Pentiment. Not much to say about this one. It's a very recent release and it's very text heavy, takes place in 16th century and has a very unique art style. I don't have much to add on this because I felt like perhaps I have to be, again, in the right mindset to engage with it fairly. So I just kind of put it off playing it further, and I might wait for another day where I'm just in the mood for something like this. The Last Stop. A narrative game with 3 interwoven stories. This game has an interesting art style and some neat ideas with presentation. If you ever played Virginia, this is from the same developers. Admittedly, I didn't completely finish it because I just found the characters a little too much for me and just not engaging enough. It just couldn't keep my attention for long. The gameplay and writing were not landing for me, really, and maybe I just need a different mindset when approaching it again. I did find Virginia very stimulating though, so maybe I would give it another shot sometime. Life is Strange: True Colors. What the hell, man? Like, this game just stopped working for me about 3 hours in, and I was really enjoying it, so this is a letdown. It's got a mellow and down-to-earth story, a nice soft art style, some great music, sort of like this rustic bluegrass, sort of indie pop kind of mix, and the themes feel very personal, which I love. But I tried to load it once from a different platform, and from then on I couldn't load my save file anymore. I was just stuck in a loading loop. I'm bummed about it. I just wish I don't want to redo it from start, so I just put it down, which is too bad. Plague Tale Requiem. Also, what the hell, man? Like, this is another one where I hit 3 progression blocking bugs in this game, all in the span of the first couple of hours, and I was enjoying my time, and I think it's so charming, the relationship that the 2 characters have, Hugo and Amicia. I just decided this game wasn't ready for me to play it because of these bugs. It may look kind of fancy, but it was just nowhere near stable enough for prime time, at least in my experience. Number 40, Metro Exodus. The fact that this is the lowest on the list should give you indication of just how high quality most of the games on this list are. Metro Exodus is a sequel to the acclaimed Metro franchise. This entry has you actually leaving the infested and claustrophobic subways of Moscow and seeing the wilderness beyond. It uses a train to get you from one location to the next and has you fighting all sorts of nasty mutated beasts while fending off the elements and radiation. The performance in this game, though, was so poor, I got yanked right out of the experience. I also didn't find the gameplay to be super fun. I really tried to get into it, but it felt a little bit like sandpaper on me, so I just decided to move on. Number 39, Somerville. This one is an actual disappointment. The pedigree behind the studio founders, as well as the striking art style, might invoke a sense that you're about to be treated to a game like Playdead's Inside or Tarsiers' Little Nightmare series. In reality, it is quite beautiful, but clumsy adventure that's over before it can truly get its teeth into you. If anything, this title sort of proved how easy the competitors were making their quiet and thoughtful adventure games look, and what happens if you miss on the crucial bits of polish you need. It felt fleeting and somewhat weightless. As one friend put it, this could have been an email. Number 38, Umurangi Generation. I borrowed the description right from the developer's page because this is too perfect. It's a first-person photography game in the shitty future. And it's true, the future is shitty in Umurangi. The photography is also kind of a bit lackluster too, as are the environments. I really looked forward to this game, but found it too unpolished for my liking. I really felt like navigation in a game that's solely about walking around and taking photos in a limited space should be really polished and nailed down. That wasn't the case. Maybe that's another me problem. I sometimes ask for indies to make a very polished experience for me and manage scope to attain that. But perhaps I need to open up to even rougher edges than I'm normally used to. Number 37, Risk of Rain 2. It's a minimal 3D roguelike game. I liked it somewhat. It was fairly short. Within 2 play sessions, I was able to make it to the final sequence of the game and almost finish it completely. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of games that relish in showing a billion damage numbers on screen at the same time. I feel like maybe I'm broken a bit in that regard. I don't have the chemicals in my brain firing when I see that stuff. I just see visual noise that makes it just hard to read the situation. Still, there is some fun to be had in trying to beat a level fast enough before enemy power grows to be out of hand and you can no longer stand a chance. For fans of games like Dead Cells though, I'd say this is an easy recommendation. Number 36, The Quarry. We had high hopes for this game. We're big fans of Until Dawn, a favorite from Supermassive. I call these games date night games because they're somewhere between a night out at the movies and a more involved video game. There's limited interactivity and some decisions that need to be made for semi-branching paths. Unfortunately, I don't think this game hit the high highs of Until Dawn, and it all wrapped up so quickly that it didn't feel like our decisions really made all that much difference. Either way though, it's still fun to throw the popcorn in and watch your favorite character that you love to hate get attacked by some corny monster at the summer camp. Number 35, Death's Door. This game is a bit of a Zelda-like, with an isometric angled camera and simple swipey sort of combat. Some of the character animations, especially the bosses, were very expressive and have a special sort of dark, cute look to them. I really liked some of the visual design, but wish the gameplay was just as strong. I'm gonna be super annoying and say I agree with a minority of people who think that this game should have had an included map. I don't think their areas or layout or visual identity were strong enough for me to tell where I was at any given moment, which makes it somewhat disappointing and it's a more frustrating play. Number 34, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. Like a couple games this year, this one gave me a roller coaster of emotions. I love the callback to one of the best 2D games ever in the form of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. However, it feels like when you invite comparisons to the king, you may just end up looking like a serf. In this case, it's not that dire, but just isn't this at the same level. The art direction is a bit inconsistent. Maybe the worst aspect for me, though, were the ludicrous difficulty spikes that pulled me right out of the game. I couldn't get a sense for the progression the game was trying to push me towards. However, I did love some of the enemy design and some of the music tracks, and I'll admit, for a brief time, it was nice to be in something Castlevania adjacent. Number 33, Art of the Rally. What a funny little game. This is all about the zen feeling of being on the open road with taking difficult turns in your crappy car and learning about car rally history. It's a small game, but it was fairly charming. It just felt maybe a little too minimal for me or my interests, but otherwise I was having some fun with it. Just check this out if you want to just put your feet up and get in the zone with a very simple gameplay loop. Number 32, Broken Age. This is a big adventure game from Double Fine that garnered a lot of attention up to its release because of the open nature of its development process. It's really lighthearted romp through a fantastical world. I did get caught on some of the puzzles on this one, which felt a bit frustrating at times. I like the voices and the general atmosphere in the game, but this one really hit me at just how the old school design for puzzle game or adventure games rather just hasn't aged as well as I hoped. Something like Return to Monkey Island or Thimbleweed Park solved this issue pretty handily in a game hint manual that's built right into the game. Number 31, Cyberpunk 2077. I'll just cut to the chase. This game feels miserable to play, but it's still one of the most acutely realized sci-fi worlds ever. I really don't like the gameplay or the quests in this game much at all. It's stuffed to the gills with unnecessary items and quests that feel like they're superfluous and uninteresting. However, the city itself, kind of like GTA 5, is the real star of the show. And it's actually staggering just how much work was put into all sorts of future details, like streets intersections that light up the ground, or all the incredible materials that are used in the fashion of the denizens of Night City. The main story quest is not too shabby either. It takes you on a big tour of the locales and factions of the area. But I tried to play this twice this year and hilariously gave up both time, and oddly enough just ended up enjoying the limited anime series more than the actual game itself. Number 30, Return to Monkey Island. This was my preferred adventure game of the year. It had great music, hilarious writing, and some semi-decent puzzles. As I mentioned earlier, this game actually has a built-in hint guide that slowly reveals a solution to you rather than just spell it out for you. It's an amazing, accessible way to dislodge somebody's progress while keeping you have fun in this big adventure. I'll be honest, what really put this down a rung for me was actually just getting hung up on the art style. I kept an open mind going in, but sadly it just ended up disappointing me. The art feels a bit flat and lacking some of the expression that I hope for this whimsical story. Still, I really respect what the team put together in this game. Number 29, Descenders. This game reminded me a bit of the Trials series. There's a really fun physics-driven element to it. It's fun to push the limit of how much speed you can build up before completely losing control and just breaking all your limbs in a devastating wipeout. It even has some procedurally generated elements to the levels, a bit like a rogue-like nature to the campaign as well. I guess the only reason I didn't sink more time into this game is it just didn't feel either super novel or innovative. I sort of felt like I've played this game a number of forms before. I thought this game had a nice relaxing flow to it though, and even considering a nail-biting scenarios you're thrown into, I just felt like it was a nice calm game to play. Number 28, Signalis. Signalis is 2022's big Silent Hill / Resident Evil indie horror-like game. I think it wears its various homage on its sleeve, both to its benefit and its detriment. The exploration and especially the first-person puzzle elements in this game were really creepy and developed a nice sense of atmosphere. Where the game gets a bit tripped up though is in the item management, which feels wholesale cribbed from the OG Resident Evil games. And I feel like with that many limited item slots and with moving things from various chests, that can only be a risky design element in my opinion, and it can only really work if the risk versus reward is balanced very well. In this game though, I found it to be an exercise in patience and partly some frustration. I don't like ferrying items around for no reason. Still, it has some amazing imagery and art design. Also, principally developed by 2 people. Wow. Number 27, Donut County. This game is tiny, but almost guarantees a laugh or two. The premise is very Katamari Damacy-like in that you move a hole around to swallow up objects, which in turn makes your hole a little bigger, and so you can swallow bigger objects. The end game is obviously swallowing up huge pieces of architecture or landscape, and then causing some chaos. The characters are really funny, and what story was there did make me smile. Again, like Katamari Damacy, it does sort of tug at a primal thread in us that just loves to watch something grow and eventually get out of control and cause tons of chaos. It's hard not to at least like this game, if not love it. Number 26, TMNT Shredder's Revenge. This game is home to 2022's best song, We Ain't Came to Lose, by rappers from Wu-Tang Clan. Listen.
Nice to meet you, now I'm here to beat you with full force. Mess up your facial features. Hasta la vista, I'm selling all y'all little Caesars. All y'all stuff your face with is pizza crack like a hard-boiled.
It's badass. The game itself is chock full of incredible sprite animations and is really fun, if not brief, return to the arcade glory days of scarfing down a slice with your friends Donnie, Mike, Raph, and Leo. Hell, even April gets to join in on the fun this time. I had a great time playing this one online. It had some slightly janky timing on some enemies that frustrated near the end, and some of the on-rails vehicle segments in the game were just okay. But overall, this was a really nice love letter to the arcade classics we love, and you can tell they really gave it their all. With just a couple of hours of playtime, I just wish the ride lasted a tiny bit longer. Number 25, Vampire Survivors. So this is 2022's biggest cookie clicker-like game. Just like Risk of Rain 2, the billion numbers on screen don't really do anything for me, and this kind of feels like a natural evolution of a clicker game. But for that, I feel it does deserve some credit. However, I almost wish that I had that chemical brain drip that other people seem to get from playing games like this. At some point, your screen is utterly filled with beasts and numbers of damage and projectiles going everywhere. And it's not an exaggeration to say at some point you just don't know what the hell is going on. It's extremely simple gameplay loop, which requires almost no input from the player, is exactly what some people are looking for in these crazy times. Drink in one hand, joystick in the other. This is one game on the list I could easily recommend to others, even if I know it's not necessarily hitting the same for me. Number 24, Immortality. Well, what an interesting game this is. It contains 3 full-length fictional movie archives that are all spliced up. The player pauses in the clips and clicks on an item in the frame to transport themselves to a similar context in a completely different clip. Like clicking an apple in one frame, bringing yourself to another film clip that also has an apple in it. This way you try to discover new clips and see what these movies are all about. But even more importantly, trying to find out the underlying themes beneath the surface that aren't so obvious. I really wish that the game worked for me the way that Her Story and Telling Lies did. I went through the whole game just clicking on random stuff until the credits eventually rolled. So unfortunately for me, it wasn't as strategic or cerebral as I was expecting. But what was there was super fascinating and easily one of the gutsiest productions this year. Number 23, God of War 3. As you can tell, some of the games on this list are old, but some of them even stand tall after all these years. This was a big turnaround for me this year. I had a weird relationship with the old God of War titles. They were a bit gratuitously edgy for me back in the day. Even as a teenager, I remember just feeling that they were a little too ragey for me. Kratos is cruel, angry, and the entire presentation of the games reflect that. But I always respected how solid the development was. It felt almost sad that all this incredible work was being put into these games that I could not connect with. Honestly though, coming at this through the lens of the 2018 reboot called just God of War, I was able to enjoy the older games without as much of a knee-jerk reaction on the dated, try-hard rage lordiness to it all. I actually really liked the thrill ride of God of War 3, and even after all this long, it still has about the most truly epic and thrilling opening of any game I've ever seen. It blows my mind to think of how much work and planning would have gone into nailing that intro. It's almost worth the price of admission for that intro alone. Still a bit too ragey for me, maybe, but actually pretty decent. Number 22, Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. It's the lovable indie platformer star Shovel Knight, but in a roguelike arcade puzzle game. This game is really clever in blending character action and classic puzzle game, as you actually move a character around the board. We had a lot of fun playing this in versus mode. It really tests your skills of on-the-fly judgment and strategy. It's kind of what you expect. You get huge combos to send garbage over to your friends panel. The single-player roguelike mode was fairly short-lived and only lasted a couple sessions, but the multiplayer is hours of fun, especially after you try out the various characters and the different abilities. This was a lot of fun. Number 21, Resident Evil Village Shadows of Rose. This is just Resident Evil 8 Village, but more of it. It's a DLC for Resident Evil 8. This game had some really clever ways to revisit old locations. Also, there's a sequence in this game that is about the single most terrifying thing ever put into a Resident Evil game. I was thoroughly spooked by that. Normally, I'd say this game would have no business being so high on the list, but my list, my rules. And I just love Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil in general. This game was dumb fun, and I loved it. Number 20, Heavenly Bodies. This one is like QWOP in space, which feels a little personal to me, as that almost sounds like the description for our game, Starwall. In this game, you try to do serious tasks in a flailing and sometimes disastrous way by controlling your individual limbs with an analog stick. The developers really came up with some really fun scenarios that are sound on paper, but hilariously go awry when trying to do even the simplest movements, like trying to thread a needle while drunk and on a unicycle. I could see this game really aggravating certain people, but I love the sense of accomplishment when you come to terms with the controls and can keep your space buddy alive for just one more mission. Whew, this is tough. As I don't know if you can tell, but this is becoming like so hard to rank. I just love all of these games, so this is extremely difficult to rank these properly. But here we go. Number 19, Point B. This is the only mobile game on the list this year, but what a game it is. From the developer of Downwell, you have something that almost acts inversely. You actually travel vertically upward while trying to feed a monster juice below you. It does, I don't think it's got the same sort of replayable itch that Downwell had, but I really like the learning curve on this one. Once you get a sense for how your character will behave and control, you can fling them around with confidence, and you even start unlocking new abilities to get even further. The game's so simple, but a joy to play. I like that it knows the limits of this and the strengths of the platform, and it still challenges the target audience to push themselves to get a bit further in their game. Number 18, Returnal, Tower of Sisyphus. I love Returnal. It was one of my favorite games from a couple years ago. This mode that they've added was effectively an arcade mode, but it had some great story beats, just like the main campaign from a couple years ago, the ones that were really creepy. This team hit gold with this concept. The only reason it's not higher on this list is that it's effectively just a smaller DLC, but the foundation of the gameplay and story of Returnal that is underneath is still solid as a rock. Number 17, Valorant. This game kind of surprised me. It's pretty much exactly as the description sounds. It's Counter-Strike with more fantastical world and abilities, and honestly, that works for me. I love that most weapons just aim like laser guns, and it becomes more a game about position, abilities, and strategy. I played long enough to get into the ranked mode, which is fun, and I got my ass handed to me on most matches, but that's to be expected. Like Counter-Strike, there is a sense of mastery imparted on the relatively simple maps and design, so you see the same rooms and corners over and over, and it's up to you to hone your approach and eke out more wins. I can see this game continue to develop a really nice following. Number 16, Rocket League. Funny enough, while I had seen a ton of Rocket League before, I had never actually put my hands on the controller to play it. Unsurprisingly though, this game is even more fun to play than to watch. It has a deceptively elegant design that you'd almost be tricked into thinking was an easy game to create. That's the usual sign of brilliance. The balance is just so on point, and it makes for such a delicate dance between the two teams. Watching you roll and jump uncontrollably and then eventually transition to a perfect near head-butted goal, that's an amazing feeling. Using football or soccer as the theme makes it very approachable and understandable. Huge bonus points that the game is also cross-platform and free to play, made for a super easy recommendation this year. Number 15, Cities Skylines. This game is almost pure tilt value for me. As I said, I love cities, and this is one of the few games this year that gave me an appreciation for something in everyday life, the city around us. Yeah, it's like old SimCity games, but that's actually kind of the point. Those games were great. It does a city simulator well, and even brings some nice, unique elements of its own to the table. I really enjoyed mulling over policies like free public transportation. I mean, in its own strange way, this game is a bit like hopeful fiction. You can be the future civilization or city that you hope to live in. You just need the guts to follow through and a sound plan to get there. So many ways to view this game, but this year I was thankful to have a fresh new perspective on cities that can only come from an interactive medium. Number 14, Chicory. This game is so darn cute, wholesome, and sometimes even real, down to earth. I mean, God, it's a game where you can somewhat crudely paint the entire world. You can even play in co-op where your buddy just gets another paintbrush to help you paint the entire world as if it's part of the canvas. This game has a really good soundtrack. Lena Raine, who also did the wonderful Celeste soundtrack, has done it yet again. This game is all about creativity, being an artist, having doubts of self-worth, and what you bring to the world. It's heart. It's all of the heart. The gameplay was slightly loose and inelegant at times, which is somewhat of a downside, but all the other elements were that good. Highly recommended in co-op for those who want something even a hair more relaxing than the normal fare. Number 13, Toem. In my head, at least, it's hard to rank some of these wholesome indie games. Not that they are in a separate category or something, as is the rule about this list, but some of them hold a sort of similar place in my heart with lots of spirit and usually slightly more easygoing nature. Toem is the actual most relaxing game I played this year. You play a plucky little photographer out to explore the world. This game really made me think that the verb photograph is just such an excellent underutilized action in games. In Toem, you need to find the hidden and delightful things in this world. You get a nice angle, You check off a nice list of cute missions, and you have to explore every inch of this diorama-like world. It doesn't overstay its welcome and had me pushing to find everything in it, not because I wanted to check off a list, but just because it was that enjoyable. Number 12, Warzone. I played a ton of this game during the pandemic. What is weird though is that 2022 was both the best year for Warzone and also its worst. For the majority of the year though, I was playing the really stellar Fortune's Keep map. This mode introduced a more manageable length of match, and the map itself was small enough to get to know more intimately while also staying large enough to leave these spaces for unique stories. It's the very best that this game has ever been. Unfortunately, it capped off the year with a title I have a little trouble clicking with in Warzone 2, which undid a lot of what I loved about Fortune's Keep. Still, I want to recognize what a good job that this team did with the aforementioned superior Warzone 1 game mode. Here's hoping I can return to those glory days someday. Yeah, I mean, this one had me pinned in a stranglehold right out of the gates. I mean, you play as a mischievous cat in a cool sci-fi city where mysteriously all the humans have disappeared. Yeah, of course I'm going to be giving that a shot. For me, though, this game actually delivered. Yeah, it's absolutely appealing on the themes of and presentation alone, but it's also just clever in the way that it integrates being a cat. What sealed the deal for me was the very simple yet touching story in the game itself. I was rooting for our furry friend, and when the credits rolled, you can't help but think where your friend might be off to next. Oddly enough, it reminded me of how Untitled Goose Game ended up being a legitimately excellent game, despite how on the surface it would be easy to dismiss it as just another meme. Number 10, God of War 2. Damn, this game was cool. It has such interesting puzzle designs, great combat, and overall really nails this massive scale in the world. It was proper challenging too. At times, I almost couldn't believe how much this was asking of me in the regular or the default difficulty mode. Overall, I was super impressed by the level design, the ability designs, and the general flow of the game. Some of the puzzles feel like a real treat, where you're asked to do some fairly intuitive things that you might not have even expected the games to support. It feels like an experience that truly pushed against the limits of that generation, and the developers were firing on all. Number 9, Splatoon 3. Some friends and I lovingly call this Splatoon 1.5.5. It feels like a half step from a half step for a sequel. There is a part of me though that understands that it doesn't really make sense to change too much of what undoubtedly works so well. The matches in this game are still some of the most frantic and decidedly fun multiplayer experiences out there, and I know it sounds like a backhanded compliment a little bit, but coming from Nintendo's internal studios, it is shocking at how excellent and modern the game design and balancing is for this online game. It also fills a niche that some other games never did. It's family friendly, it's extremely short with only 4 to 5 minute rounds, and it's decidedly bright and colorful like only a very small minority of games in this sort of genre are. It might be a half step of a half step, but it has some odd online connectivity kinks that it needs to solve still, but it's a razor sharp multiplayer experience not to be missed. Number 8, Gran Turismo 7. This is the surprise of the year for me. I don't think I would have guessed that a driving simulator game would have won me over so hard. It's such a fascinating package. It's got kitschy and cozy presentation in the menus, with a funny little cafe hub where you choose missions from a dinner menu, and overall presentation that just screams class. But beyond all that, what really got me was the pure, incredible gameplay. The DualSense feedback really helped to transform this into a racing experience like no other. Every turn requires strategy and thought, and feeling the slip of the tires in your controller gives you the immediate feedback you need. And all of it just feels so good to play. I couldn't get enough. This is one of those shining examples where I was rewarded handsomely for keeping an open mind. Number 7, Tunic. This is a lovely game about a fox that goes on an adventure. It's very clearly a nod to the original Legend of Zelda games, where the level of freedom was high and it felt like there was secrets lurking around every turn. There's a central mechanic to Tunic that I kind of don't want to describe in case it's a surprise to anybody listening, but it's one of my favorite ideas in a game in some time. The music in this game is also wonderful, as is the beautiful art design, but this game revolves around secret, and I just don't want to describe too much, at the risk of spoiling it for people who are about to play it. Please play Tunic. It's an excellent game. Number 6, Gorogoa. I haven't been able to stop thinking about this game all year. It's hard to even describe why that's the case. This is such a simple game in some ways. You just see panels of art and can move elements between the panels. ultimately altering what you're looking at and changing the actual contents of the world inside. It has a dreamlike quality to it and a story that sort of floats along effortlessly while staying slightly ambiguous in the realm of myths. There's something quietly confident about the direction of this game, and for that, I find it very inspiring. It feels like every panel is a puzzle box with both thematic meaning and also a fun riddle for the player to solve. What an excellent title, and I'm sure to revisit it again someday. Number 5, Sifu. This game gets me excited just thinking about it. I mean, if there was one game this year that just embodied coolness, it's Sifu. And not just that the game is cool to look at, but it's a very rare title to make the player feel cool while expressing themselves within it. Nearly every element was designed to make the player feel like they're living in the milliseconds between blows in a kung fu movie, where you almost stop thinking and have to start listening instead to your intuition. Again, this is something that can truly only happen in an interactive medium. Sure, you've all seen Jackie Chan action flicks, but what does it feel like for you to be in a lightning-fast standoff with 3 people and have to anticipate, react, and execute? This game uses an interesting mechanic as well, where the main character will age every time they die. It means you have limited lifespan to get your revenge on the gang that wronged you, but mastering the art of kung fu becomes so electric that you'll keep coming back until you surprise yourself at how you're running circles around that enemy that once wiped the floor with you. This is a cool path forward for brawlers and a shining example of what an open concept fighting game could be. I can't wait for whatever Slow Clap makes next. Number 4, Horizon Forbidden West. Guerrilla's follow-up to 2017's Horizon Zero Dawn is decidedly the prettiest game ever. It's a rich world with sick robo-dino designs, a world steeped in lore of ancient San Francisco, and has fluid, suspenseful combat. To top it off, I think it has maybe one of the best soundtracks of the year. This open world was a real pleasure to explore. What blows my mind in this game is that even the side characters and NPCs have better quality than almost any other game. The side quests are all composed of bespoke, motion captured and animated sequences, giving it a feeling like you're seeing quality at every turn. For me, this franchise really turned around with this game. While I only enjoyed Zero Dawn, especially for its story, I loved Forbidden West. Number 3, Elden Ring. I lovingly called this game Dark Souls 4 or Demon Souls 5, as it's basically an extension of those games in almost every way except lore. As I've heard a number of people say at this point, sometimes you can find yourself criticizing the things that you really like more than you normally would, and that's Elden Ring for me. This game is a flawed masterpiece. It has a beautiful vision for how a new kind of open world could be composed, and it lays out confidently in the first half of the game. The open world design is the main element that they've added to the game, and at times it sort of feels stitched hastily together with their classic castles and caverns. But overall, it feels like a wonderful blueprint for a new style of world where danger and new secrets are available to you at every stone's throw if you're brave enough to seek them out. Maybe the most interesting thing about FromSoft to me, though, is that they found success in honing on their strengths over the years. This may be Demon Souls 5, but their pursuit of mastery in this one genre has paid mega dividends. Hats off to From. Number 2, Fortnite. This is maybe a first for me, holding a multiplayer title in such high regard on my list. Feels like a fairly rare thing for me until lately. I think maybe Smash Brothers and StarCraft 2 were maybe the last multiplayer games to really vault up into legendary status for me. This game is really something else. The first thing that really got to me was the fact that I could play split-screen online co-op with my partner, and it ran super well to boot. That's a holy grail of multiplayer goodness. A huge world, tons of replayability, and a very high skill ceiling, all played from the couch together. Like Smash Brothers, I feel like this game very often gets a reputation of what it looks like on the outside, even though its bones are solid and honestly one of the best designed games I've seen. But the real kicker that had me spinning over this game was just how incredible the support has been. Since starting at midsummer, the amount of map evolutions, weapon rotations, and short-term seasonal events has been immense. And almost every one of these comes with interesting gameplay ideas, like a birthday event for Fortnite's anniversary, where you can find giant gift boxes that serve also as protection, and also have birthday balloons that allow floating in the sky, or a Goku character from Dragon Ball that happens to also come with a wild laser beam that can level half of a town. This game feels like it's constantly staying fresh, it's vibrant, and a ton of fun to play. Number 1, God of War Ragnarok. I never would have guessed that God of War would be something I enjoy this much. It feels like the team that literally changed the narrative direction of this series in 2018 grew up, had families, and injected their talents into something that finally connects with people, or at least me. This game had my partner and I already welling up with emotion in the first 10 minutes. As someone who could barely muster any care for the original games, that's a massive shift. This game is maximalist fun. It feels impossibly huge in scope, brimming with detail, and I'll just say it, it's a better blockbuster than anything I've seen out of Hollywood in years. I know that's a spicy take, but without giving it away, I'll say that the story, looked at holistically, makes for an incredible cap on a truly epic saga. This is a rare gem that I had almost no issues with. Credits started to roll, and I realized I liked or loved almost everything about it. Exciting gameplay, incredible score, characters and story I love to follow, and the incredible creativity of this world that they have built. This game kind of has it all, and it's the best thing I played all year. So there it is. I just want to thank you if you stuck around for this whole thing. Thanks so much for following me on this. And this was a ton of fun to put together, honestly. It is just so enjoyable for me to think about the games that I've played or talk to other people about games. I just can't get enough of that. So yeah, thanks again. And I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.